Hello, I'm very grateful to the Pondicherry Lit Festival for inviting me to speak about my book, Balochistan in the Crosshairs of History. This is a subject that has attracted a lot of attention in recent years and particularly in recent weeks because of certain human rights atrocities coming to the attention of the world through the activities of the Baloch diaspora in various parts of the world. So many in India would have wondered what the whole conflict was about and if it has any bearing on India. And this is what I am here to discuss. Balochistan was an independent country until it was annexed by Jinnah on 27th of March 1948. And it has since been struggling to regain its freedom. It is important to realize that Jinnah accomplished this task even while he was fighting a war with India in Jammu and Kashmir, and Britain approved of the annexation. Indians need to understand what is the geopolitics behind this development in our neighborhood. Now, the Kalat state is the core of Balochistan, and it is prime geostrategic territory. In 1947, it was bounded by Afghanistan in the north, Punjab and Sindh provinces to its east, Persia to its west, and the Arabian Sea formed the southern coast, which is also known as the Makran coast. Now, between World War I and II, oil was discovered in Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Persia, and so on. And this became very important for the Western Allies for the post-Second World War domination of the world. And they began their planning according to that. And this is where the partition of India and the subjugation of Balochistan comes in. Now, an Indian diplomat, Narinder Singh Sarela, he was the I'm sorry to say, his work has not got the recognition it deserves. He went to the Mountbatten papers, he went to the British archives, he went to the American presidential archives. He did strenuous work and produced a book called The Untold Story of India's Partition. And it really deserves more attention than it has received so far. But anyway, it is Sarela who discovers and makes it clear to us that by March 1945, before the Second World War ended officially, Winston Churchill and the British General Staff had decided that India must be partitioned for strategic reasons. The idea of Pakistan was seeded much earlier because they think far, and so we see that in December 1930, Muhammad Iqbal, addressing the All India Muslim League at Allahabad, says, and I quote, "I would like to see the Punjab, Northwest Frontier Province, Sindh and Balochistan amalgamated into a single state." Now please note that there is no mention of Kashmir here. Then in 1933, the famous Chaudhry Rahmat Ali proposes that Pakistan should include Punjab, Afghan, which means Northwest Frontier Province, the Pashtun area, Kashmir, Sindh, and Balochistan. So we can see that Balochistan was always intended to be a part of the potential Pakistan if that was going to be created. So now when the British decided to retreat, they said the subcontinent must be divided. At this stage, the Khan of Kalat became very active, and he said he has the right to be independent because Kalat has its own bicameral legislature. Unlike the princely states of India, it is different, and it has a direct treaty relations with the British Crown and a treaty of 1876 which ensures that its independence will be preserved and there will be non-interference in its domestic affairs. This is why the Khan of Kalat never joined the Chamber of Princes in Delhi, because he said Kalat is not a part of the British Indian Empire. Theoretically, this is correct. Now we move on and we see that the cabinet mission comes to India in March 1946. It is headed by Lord Pethick Lawrence and comprises A.B. Alexander and Sir Stafford Cripps. This comes to discuss the modalities for transfer of power, and it is said that Kalat's future will also be decided here. So the Khan of Kalat has a very detailed memorandum prepared by a legal team comprising Ibrahim Ismail Chandrigarh, who becomes Prime Minister of Pakistan for briefly later, in the 50s, I think. And then Sir Sultan Ahmed, noted barrister, Sardar B.K. Memon, and Sir Walter Mauchline. And they talk about the future of Kalat and the claims it has to its old tributaries, Las Bela and Karan, and the Mari and the Bukti tribes. These regions, you can make out, are sort of separated by the British through various treaties in the build-up to 47, and they are encouraging these people to be independent of the Khan of Kalat and his Kalat state. Now, Ebad Khan also engages Muhammad Ali Jinnah because he's a noted barrister of the time, and he is personally very, very enamored of Jinnah, and this proves to be his undoing because he himself quotes in his autobiography Jinnah telling him, and I quote, "Since I am myself fighting for the freedom of the Indian Muslims, I am duty-bound to help you in your noble cause. I must, however, tell you that a time will come when you will see that all the Muslim countries will be united into a federation, and Balochistan, on account of its geographical position, will play a leading part in bringing about this unity." Unquote. Now you can see that this is a ridiculous statement prima facie. If all Muslim countries were to be united, then Pakistan need never have been created. Those territories could have amalgamated with Afghanistan on the north or with Iran on the east. None of this happens. So this is just something that the Khan of Kalat should have realized is a warning signal, but he misses it completely. Now Jinnah advises the Khan to stay aloof from the rising educated middle class and elites of Balochistan, and says that the British don't like them, so they will create problems for you. So the unity which Kalat state needed at the time of the run-up to partition is denied to the Khan in this way. Jinnah also says, please indirectly support the Muslim League. And here again the Khan falls into the trap and he says, no, I'll support publicly. He gives enormous material and psychological support to the Muslim League, with the result that his own citizens, the Baloch, the Pashtans, and the Sindhis, who are in the territory of Balochistan, they start veering towards the Muslim League. And things got so bad that once Jinnah went to Balochistan, he was weighed in gold, and that money was given as a contribution to the Muslim League. Anyway, coming back to the memorandum submitted to the cabinet mission in March 1946, the Khan gives long arguments from international jurisprudence. Very cogent document is prepared and says that Kalat has a special status and the governments that succeed the Raj cannot inherit treaty relationships with the crown. They can inherit relationships with the British Indian government in New Delhi, but not the relationships with Whitehall. So he says, my position of 1876 must be restored, and the principalities of Kalat, which were leased to the British government at various times, they must be returned in totality. And because this is a legal issue, it has to be done prior to partition. Otherwise, there will be legal lacuna and Kalat state will not be able to take over those territories and start governing. This is very important issues that he raises, which are totally ignored by the British. Now, Mountbatten comes into the picture. Before that, I must say that at some stage in 1944, because the partition had not been decided by the British, the then in charge of strategic planning in India, Major General R.C. Moni, he says we should give back the territories to Kalat and we can use Kalat as a military base to mine the Persian Gulf. But at that time itself, some people in Britain, in London, felt that Kalat is too weak as a state militarily. So it should be a part of the future Pakistan, which is a stronger state. And they tell Mountbatten, by September 1947 itself, Mountbatten is told that this is the plan of London, don't encourage Kalat. At the same time, the British High Commissioner in Pakistan is told to guide the government of Pakistan away from making any commitment to Kalat, which will involve recognition of the state as an independent international entity. And this had to be conveyed because Jinnah was still officially the representative of Kalat state. Now, Narendra Singh Sarila found that the British and the American archives showed that Viceroy Linlithgow was there from 1936 to 1944. He had assiduously built up Jinnah as a sole spokesperson of the Muslims in India. And later, Wavell, who was Viceroy from 1943 to 47, he had prepared a map of Pakistan and given it to London by February 1946. And this is the map which is later merely executed, almost unchanged by Cyril Radcliffe when he comes to India. Now, Wavell does this because he realizes that things are getting difficult for the British. They need to make an orderly retreat from India if they have to maintain the bases in the region. And they feel that if we have to control the Middle East and the Indian Ocean region for the post-Second World War era, for this Jinnah will be cooperative and Nehru and the Congress will not. So partition has to be done. And once the naval mutinies took place and other mutinies in India took place, Wavell said, just go for partition. So in February, he sends his partition plan, and according to this, West Pakistan will include Sindh, Northwest Frontier Province, Balochistan, Rawalpindi, Multan and Lahore divisions of Punjab, but not Amritsar and Gurdaspur divisions. So these regions, which become part of West Pakistan, have only one thing in common, which is that the British Chiefs of Staff feel that these are important for a defense against the Soviet Union, which will be the prime rival in the post-Second World War era. So we see that Mountbatten is critical to what happens in Balochistan. The most important meeting was in July 19, 1947, when Mountbatten summons Kalat State and Muslim League representatives and says that he wants to settle everything between the princely states and the dominions by August 15, 1947. He says to Kalat that the districts which are directly administered by the Khan of Kalat include Makran, Jhalawaan, Sarawan, Kachhi, Dombi and Kaheri, whereas the rulers of Kharan and Las Bela disagree that he is their sovereign and that they are his feudatories, and so these parties will have to discuss the issue themselves. Mountbatten adds that paramountcy will make, when it lapses, will make the states independent de jure, but very few states will benefit from independence, and Kalat will need some form of association with Pakistan. And so, this meeting discusses the fate of leased territories leased by the British, and they include Quetta, Nushki, Nasirabad, and Bolan, where Prime Minister Aslam Khan says, you return these to us before the transfer of power. But now Mountbatten says that the future government of Pakistan is objecting to the return of these treaties, these territories to Kalat, and it is claiming that these successor authorities in India would inherit all treaty obligations incurred on behalf of India, and Pakistan government will be heir to all the obligations, the burdens and the benefits of treaties with Kalat, just as they will be for the Anglo-Afghan Treaty of 1921. Now, Aslam Khan says that no, the leases were explicitly between the Khan of Kalat, his heirs and successors, and the British government alone, and there was no provision for transfer of inheritance of the leases from the British to which they were personal. But Abdul Rab Nishtar of the Muslim League says no, that's not correct. But Barrister Sultan Ahmed says that all rights and treaties, obligations arising from the Treaty of 1876 cannot be transferred to a successor government, because the treaty had been made by Kalat and with the government of Britain, not with the government of India. This is actually a sticky thorn. Now Mountbatten says that he has been advised that under international law, treaties with states over which the Crown has exercised paramountcy would lapse and could not be transferred to successor states, and that this was envisaged in the Indian Independence Bill. He suggests that if the parties can't agree on any legal solution, they should go to the arbitral tribunal. Now Sultan Ahmed says that maybe the Khan of Kalat should first talk to Jinnah and discuss matters. Aslam Khan says we are willing to go for arbitration, and we are still willing to discuss the future of Quetta with the Pakistan government, but Nushki, Bolan and Nasirabad should be returned without delay. But Pakistan government does not want these leased territories, especially Quetta, which is the most important city of Balochistan and its center of communications, to be given up. Now Mountbatten further says that Nasirabad will have no value for Kalat if the irrigation supply is cut off. So it will have to make its own arrangements for the continuation of water supply. Aslam Khan, the Prime Minister of Kalat, says that we will give Pakistan the use of our railway facilities in Nushki. But the Muslim League representative, Mr. Nishtar, says that Kalat will not have any benefit from having a common border with Afghanistan. So now Mountbatten says that after my last meeting with the Khan of Kalat, Jinnah has said that he's too busy to handle Kalat because he's handling the whole problem of the new country of Pakistan. And so he's going to rely on Mountbatten to find a solution to the vexatious issues. He is thus insulated from all the deliberations. Mountbatten now suggests a standstill agreement. Mountbatten now suggests a standstill agreement between Pakistan and Kalat, to which Kalat agrees. Then at the next meeting on July 28, Ahmed Yar Khan informs the meeting that Jinnah had asked if Kalat will send a representative to the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan. But he had said no, Kalat has an independent status. He says, repeatedly he says this, that I am willing to discuss defense, foreign policy and communications. But now again, Mountbatten says that the leased territories are going to be a problem because lots of money has been invested by the British. And so these assets, these infrastructure, how will this be paid for? The thing to note here is that if these territories, the infrastructure, the expenses, if everything goes to Pakistan, then London has no objection. This is an argument only for Balochistan and the Khan of Kalat. So this is where the issue with Mountbatten becomes a kind of stalemate. Now, there's August 4th, there's a roundtable conference. This is attended by Mountbatten, Jinnah, Liaquat Ali Khan, Ahmad Yar Khan, Prime Minister Aslam Khan, the legal advisor Sultan Ahmad. And here it is said that Kalat state will be independent on August 5, 1947, and will enjoy the same status as it had in 1838, with friendly relations with its neighbors. 1838 is the date when the first British arrived in Balochistan, realized its strategic importance, and decided to stay there. So now another agreement is signed. That legal opinion will be sought on whether the government of Pakistan is legally bound by the agreements and treaties between the British government and Kalat. And Pakistan agrees that it will commit to all responsibilities and agreements signed by the British from 1839, the first agreement, to 1947. This is a very clever deal. The Khan of Kalat later says in his autobiography that Pakistan became the legal, constitutional and political successor of the Raj, and Kalat virtually became a part of Pakistan 10 days before Pakistan came into existence officially. Soon after this, the British tell the rulers of Kharan and Las Bela that you were feudatories of the Khan of Kalat and your territory is being reverted to Kalat state. And the Mari and Bukti tribes, which had wanted to go back to Kalat, they are told, yes, you are reunited with Kalat. So effectively you have the British Balochistan merging with Kalat state and a very large territory of Balochistan coming into existence. It looks like a solution, but it is not. Then on August 11, a standstill agreement is announced, which says that legal opinion will be sought about the treaties with the British government. And after that, there will be further meetings with Kalat and Jinnah at Karachi. So the center of power of discussion has gone towards the new government of forthcoming Pakistan. And here again the game tilts away from Kalat. So Ahmad Yar Khan, however, is hell-bent on his position. So on 15th of August, he declares his independence. But now immediately the Pakistan government objects to his action and they said, no, you now have to work under us because nothing has been decided by us. And so they reject the Declaration of Independence. And after that, there's a 9-month tug of war, letters, exchanges, push and shove between them. And finally, on March 27, 1948, Jinnah decides to annex the territory. How did this come about? Ahmad Yar Khan is struggling. He sees that the balance of power is shifting away from him. So he sends his Prime Minister Aslam Khan, Foreign Minister Douglas Fell, a British gentleman, to Karachi to discuss the leased areas with Pakistan's Foreign and States Affairs Secretary. The talks fail because now Jinnah says nothing short of merge. Ahmad Yar Khan himself goes. Ahmad Yar Khan himself goes to discuss the situation with with Jinnah in October 1947. But Jinnah says, no, you have repeatedly told me that you're going to merge, and now you sign the accession. Otherwise, you talk to the secretary. I will not now talk to you again. And he is adamant that the accession document has to be signed. Ahmad Yar Khan says, I need time to discuss with the tribes and give me at least some few months. Now he's in panic. He has the bicameral legislature with upper house and lower house, and he calls them. They both say, we are going to be independent. But now it's September 1948, and Jinnah, as we now know, is suffering from tuberculosis, which is incurable, and he feels time is running out. He did have a commitment to the British that Pakistan would comprise certain areas, and the merger, which he has not been able to accomplish, is Kalat state. Kalat is 44% of the current territory of Pakistan, so it is very, very important. So he tells the Khan that now you give me your final answer, because many times you have come and met me and said you will sign a merger, and then you renege on these commitments, which is a fact. So now we see that Jinnah decides that he has to speed up the process. So now, in February 1948, Jinnah comes to Sibi to meet the leading gentry. And here he explains to the public that I will personally deal with Kalat and I will look after Balochistan affairs myself until a new constitution is written within the next 2 years. On this pretext, he also visits the Khan at Dadar, which is nearby. It is the winter palace of the Khan. Here again, the Khan promises to merge, and a document is drawn up and given to the Khan of Kalat. The understanding that day is that the Khan of Kalat will come to Sibi Darbar the next day, sign the instrument of succession in front of all the people, and Kalat will join Pakistan. But probably because of pressure from his family, again he gets cold feet. He says, I'm ill, I can't come. And Jinnah is absolutely furious. He has to go back empty-handed. Now, Douglas Fell warns the Khan that you cannot push Jinnah like this. He will take the accession of the feudatories of Kharan and Las Bela, and we will be in a very invidious position. Aslam Khan, the Prime Minister, also sees the lengthening shadows, and he informs the upper house and the lower house that things are getting very difficult. He hints that they should accept accession to Pakistan, but nobody is prepared to listen to that. The defense minister, another Englishman, Brigadier Purvis, he also advises the Khan that Pakistan cannot accept the existence of such a large territory as Kalat on its borders without a clear international position. Because in the current situation, whether Russia or India decide to annex the territory, for India it was impossible, but he says that for argument's sake, whoever comes from the other side and annexes this territory, then gets a signature from the Khan that the accession is to that annexing power, then the damage is done. How can Jinnah have such a ambiguous situation on his borders? But unfortunately, the Khan does not listen, and so the Jinnah says that enough is enough. He has so far succeeded. There were 10 major and minor territories that were to become part of Pakistan, and the mergers and accessions were sought after the independence was declared. So Jinnah manages very readily, easily to get accession from Bahawalpur, Khairpur, Las Bela, Kharan, Makran, and small frontier states like Dhir, Swat, Amb, and Chitral. But the huge prize of Galat is evading him, and he is beginning to lose patience. Now, the thing is that Kharan, Las Bela, and Makran, the coastal district, they comprise half of Galat's territory. So when they merge, when they accede to Pakistan, half of Galat territory is gone. And this is what Douglas Fell had warned the Khan would happen. So Jinnah takes the accession from these rulers, and he informs London that this day I have done this, and London is quite happy with this progress. Now, he says to the Prime Minister of Galat, these are my territories, so please hand over the administration to my army, I am sending them, and please hand over the treasuries also. So obviously, there is huge panic in Galat, but nothing can be done. And Khan of Galat says this is violation of the standstill agreement, but very few people are listening. He says Karan and Las Bela were my feudatories. And Makran is actually a district of Galat formally, but the damage is done. Now he still holds on for another 10 days. Then something dramatic happens, which could only have been a mischief from New Delhi, which I suspect means the British, but there's no evidence on this. On the night of March 27, All India Radio in the 9 p.m. bulletin announces that Khan of Galat had approached New Delhi for accession, and it had been refused. Now, the Khan of Galat used to personally listen to All India Radio every night, and he's appalled when he hears this. He immediately sends a telegram to Mountbatten that please deny this, or please send the evidence that I have applied for accession. So 2-3 days later, Mountbatten says this was not true. Krishna Menon comes to Parliament and says this was not true. It seems to be a mistake, but it was a very serious mistake. It was actually a signal to Khan of Galat that he is well and truly cornered and he has to go only in one direction. The Khan absolutely collapses morally after he hears this, and he sends a telegram to Jinnah that I am accepting accession to Pakistan. But meanwhile, Pakistan had moved its forces anyway. So when the troops move into Pasni and Jivani, the ports, this Khan is threatened with imprisonment. I think he is also imprisoned for a while, and he signs an instrument of accession. This instrument has not been accepted by the people of Balochistan to this day. And Khan, in his autobiography, which was published in 1975, says, yes, I agree that I exceeded the scope of my mandate. I signed without discussing with my people, and I did wrong. But if I did not do this, the British agent to the Governor General would have played havoc with the Baloch, and it could have caused a fratricidal war. So the Pakistan Army moves in on April 1, 1948, and most of the members of the cabinet, like Osbaks Bizenjo, who's a rising leader at that time, Abdul Aziz Kurd, who is a very important leader of the Baloch, they are arrested. Other people go into exile. So this is the story of the annexation of Balochistan. It has a very short-lived independence for little above 9 months, and the Baloch people began their struggle for their political rights and their independence from the day the accession instrument is signed by their Khan. Dr. Nasir Dashti, who is one of the most prominent scholars of Baloch, he says the occupation of Balochistan is a typical example of collateral damage to a people orchestrated by external political developments and having nothing to do with the Baloch. In the process of making Pakistan viable, Baloch land was taken away and a protracted and bloody conflict ensued between the Baloch and Pakistan. Unquote. This is undeniably the truth. But finally, my conclusion has to be that the annexation of Balochistan was definitely a story, what can we say, a chronicle of a saga foretold, because the British were determined about it. Jinnah was determined to implement it. But also the situation was aggravated because the Khan walked totally alone. He is trapped between the British and Jinnah, who were adamant for merger. Some of his own Sardars were adamant not to side with him and to merge with Pakistan rather than obey their own Khan, who is their traditional ruler. And he failed to make an alliance with the rising political movement that favored independence. But ultimately, also, the military weakness of Balochistan had a role to play in what happened. The anthropologist Nina Swidler, one of the important scholars on Balochistan, she said that once the British accepted Pakistan, neither they nor the Muslim League would have supported an independent or semi-autonomous Kalat as a permanent polity on the border of their new state. This is what Brigadier Purvis and Douglas Fell also tried to explain to the Khan, but he was unable to understand that the country he presided over was a victim of its geography. If the sheer strategic location made it a victim to greater powers. From the time the British arrived to the time when they left, deciding that this territory has to belong to Pakistan. So, this is the long and short of why the Baloch are struggling, why we are hearing so much about them, and we have to see how far they are able to take their struggle ahead. Thank you so much.